Got it. Hey, we need to recommandeer your bedroom.
My room? Why?
For classroom space.
For teaching.
Yeah, there's been a lot more new hunters than we expected.
Well, why don't you just teach them outside?
Well, I guess we could.
Or like out in the field with the monsters.
Do you want them to get eaten?
Well, if it means I get to keep my bedroom, then yes.
Ladies, gentlemen, and
monsters of all ages, the Monster Hunter series has been gaining serious popularity over the last few years. In the olden days, it was a bit of a cult classic. The audience wasn't overly massive, but the people who enjoyed the games were absolutely committed to them. It was much larger in Japan than it was anywhere else, but ever since the release of Monster Hunter World, the player base has been steadily increasing in ludicrous amounts, especially in the West. Of course, this is great for everyone. Some people may complain that it is souring the waters a little bit, adding more people who don't care for the etiquette of the multiplayer hunts and all of that, but honestly, more hunters is just a good thing for everyone. Why? As much as it sort of sucks to admit, the amount of money that a game makes will directly affect the amount of money spent on the next entry in that series. Put simply, the better that Monster Hunter does, the more expensive and extravagant Monster Hunter games we will get in the future. It means we get more fun spin-offs like the Stories games, it means we get more fun real-life merchandise like the plushies, and most importantly, it means that Monster Hunter is really catching on, that people in general are becoming more and more aware of the absolute gem that the Monster Hunter series is. To put this all into perspective, we recently had a report on Capcom's earnings for the last year, and there were a couple of important things of note to back up what I'm saying today and provide some interesting comparisons. By way of @Genki_JPN, we have this presentation, which ends with a pretty conclusive slide. As of this point in 2022, these are the all-time sales of the top 6 Capcom series. The top 2 here are Resident Evil, which is an extremely popular series in its own right, and then right after we have Monster Hunter. The gap here is quite noticeable. 131 million units of Resident Evil games have been sold over the years, and 88 million units of Monster Hunter games have been sold. But the important thing to note here is the recent individual successes. Monster Hunter World specifically is the highest selling game that Capcom has released ever, and is the main reason that Monster Hunter has reached this point on the list. With World itself selling a whopping 18 million units, and the Iceborne expansion to that game also selling around 9 million for a total of 27 million units of that game total. According to Nibellion, Rise itself is at 11 million units sold, with Sunbreak at 4.4 million for over 15 million total from that. If we add that together, just all of it, the 5th generation as a whole of Monster Hunter has been a massive step, selling over 42 million copies of the games within. For some perspective, again, the total unit sales for the series is 88 million. That means that this generation of Monster Hunter alone has sold almost as much as the entire rest of the series. That is absolutely insane growth, and it begs a question. How long will it be before Monster Hunter overtakes Resident Evil as Capcom's most popular series? Is that likely to happen, and if so, when will it be? Well, if you ask me, this data points to a significant change coming up. As of March 22, Resident Evil Village, the most recent properly new title in the series, has sold 6.1 million units. This is less than not only World, but also less than Rise, which is a game simply not available on as many platforms, and is thus limited in its player base in the first place. The next most recent title in general for that series is the remake of Resident Evil 2, which at 9.6 million units is still less than World and only ever so slightly above Rise, even though it was released 2 years earlier, and has therefore had 2 years longer for people to purchase it.
You're moving up in the world.
As well, we also know the number of titles released for each series in comparison. According to Capcom themselves, there are 155 Resident Evil titles that make up their 131 million units sold, and Monster Hunter has only had 55 titles. The fact that there are almost 1/3 of the amount of games for Monster Hunter, and yet it is still steadily just catching up to Resident Evil, is really sort of crazy. Now, I understand to a lot of people, this stuff is just a bunch of numbers, but as I said earlier, these numbers are quite important in what they tell us. This, more than any other way, is how we as hunters have told Capcom that we like what they're doing with Monster Hunter, that we want more Monster Hunter, and that Monster Hunter deserves to have even more effort and, of course, even larger budget put into it. For us on a personal level, this is sort of just a moment to celebrate. There are more of us hunters now than there ever have been before, and that community is growing larger with every year that passes. But what it means for the future is also pretty exciting. Whether it results in more games games, more variety, or just more monsters per game, larger games in general, or even just more effort put into marketing Monster Hunter to more people, it is impossible to ignore the fact that Monster Hunter has become an absolute winner of a series for Capcom. It has gone from being popular enough to keep going to being straight up one of its brightest shining stars. And if they're smart, they will do whatever it takes to keep it there and make it grow even further. A big thing to keep in mind here is that Monster Hunter Rise was already in development when Monster Hunter World was released, which means that a lot of the base concepts and decisions for the game had already been made quite a bit before the developers realized how popular World and Iceborne would be. That said, what's around the corner is where we see the fruits of this labor, so to say. In theory, Monster Hunter 6, whenever it may be, will be the first title made in the series with the full knowledge of how big Monster Hunter is becoming, and so we'll finally get to see what this means and how it will actually affect us as players, how big of a difference that it might make with the game as a whole compared to what we have gotten used to. And I think given the data on the 5th generation games, there's a very decent chance that this game could make the series overtake Resident Evil on Capcom's all-time sales list. And the greater the series grows, the more people find the beauty that Monster Hunter is, the better it is for all of us as players over time. Yes, there is quite the large chasm to cross when it comes to this specific point. 40 million units is no joke by any means, but it isn't insurmountable, as we've proven with the 5th generation games in general already selling more than that to this date.
See, it can be done. It can be done.
And of course, don't get me wrong, I enjoy the Resident Evil games and I want them to succeed too. I mean, a thriving Capcom in general means more resources put into any and all Capcom games, but I can't deny a bit of personal bias towards Monster Hunter itself. To a certain extent, as someone who is absolutely addicted to this series, it feels like a personal victory that it is doing this well. It feels like we have achieved something as hunters, and what the future holds is nothing but good for us. I was already excited for Monster Hunter 6, of course. I mean, more Monster Hunter is more Monster Hunter, and that's always great. And the next one was always going to be quite a doozy with it starting off a whole new generation. But this opens up so many doors. When developing a game, you have to choose which aspects you want to put your time into, and how much of a budget it gets as a whole. You have to split this up how you see fit, and with Monster Hunter World, so much of it was spent just re-envisioning what the franchise actually was. Changing the way that the maps worked as a whole was such a massive undertaking, and re-evaluating so many parts of hunting in general, changing it up quite noticeably, and quite specifically it means that for this game, they weren't building on the older games quite as much. They had to remake a ton of things to make it what it was. For Monster Hunter 6, however, it will all in theory be building on what the 5th generation has already done. The 5th gen was the hard reset, and now Monster Hunter 6 will be properly continuing that. It will be moving forwards with what we have already gotten, and hopefully in bigger and better ways. How this will actually come into play, we just won't know until we see more about the game itself. But as of right now, what this means is Monster Hunter 6 has the potential to be the most grandiose title in the series so far. It will be building off of World and will also have all of the power behind it of Capcom, knowing exactly how well that World and Iceborne performed, and Rise and Sunbreak. In theory, more resources will be allocated to this game than any other Monster Hunter game that has come before. Literally of all time. And so I don't even know how to predict what will happen with this, other than to say that it will be big. And considering the consistency the Monster Hunter team has shown us in the past, it stands a really good chance of just being the best Monster Hunter game that we've ever had, and I just cannot wait. Even if you don't care about the numbers that we talked about at the start, all you need to care about is that they mean that Monster Hunter is becoming more and more successful over time. More and more people are playing it, and this can only mean good things as the series continues into further games. I hope you've all enjoyed this little chat and celebration of what Monster Hunter has been accomplishing, and let me know if you're all as excited as I am for what the future has in hold. Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.